So I watched the fight. I watched it drunkenly Saturday morning after a night out, and I've just watched it back. Good, entertaining 6 rounds of action. Now, subscribers to my channel will know that I fought Golovkin. Well, I gave Golovkin the best chance of winning. However, I had placed a small bet on Willie Monroe Jr. If you want to hear more about that bet, I've just posted a video clarifying my bet and explaining exactly why I came to that decision. But essentially, I placed a small bet against Gennady Golovkin to win. I laid him on a UK gambling exchange, and it was an opportunity to risk a very small amount of money for the option of a large gain. I guess Golovkin was the more proven, the more experienced, and the more devastating looking operator out of the two. But there were certain intangibles Willie Monroe brought to the table in terms of his slickness, his movement, his southpaw stance, his skill set. And I just wondered how Golovkin would cope and deal and make adjustments there. So whilst I fully expected my bet to lose, on value grounds alone, I thought it was worth taking. Now, let's talk about the actual fight. Golovkin coped with the challenge Willie Monroe Jr. posed very, very well indeed. Let me say, despite the fact he lost conclusively, I was quite impressed by Willie Monroe Jr. in this fight. I thought he showed some real capability, some real heart, skill and determination. There was a lot to like about his performance. I thought his movement in the ring was excellent. I thought his angles were very good. I thought his combination punching was lovely. I thought his jab had, some decent quality behind it. However, clearly there were limitations, and for me the limitations can be summed up in 2 very easy points. Point 1 being he just didn't hit hard enough to keep Golovkin honest, and point 2 being he couldn't take the power of Triple G. And perhaps neither of those should be a surprise, because we've never seen anyone who can hurt Golovkin, and we've also never seen anyone who can really deal with the power of Golovkin easily. So I perhaps shouldn't be surprised at those 2 things, but it's another case of Golovkin showing he had a good chin, Golovkin being able to show his dominance in the power area over an opponent. The truth is, Willie Monroe was never a big puncher. Like Martin Murray, he's a guy with a very low KO percentage, and we knew he wasn't going to knock Golovkin out. Having said that, he did bring certain other things to the table, and for me, he was a very slick, good-moving opponent. The performance that Golovkin put on with him makes me think that the likes of Hassan and Darren Jickham, Erislandy Lara, it makes me think that those guys would also struggle against Golovkin. And whilst previously I'd have been quite interested in seeing Golovkin fight both Lara and Jickham, and perhaps less so after the Monroe Jr. fight. I mean, don't get me wrong, Erislandy Lara is proven at higher level than Monroe Jr. In many ways there are differences between those 3 as fighters, but there are also similarities, and the areas I thought Monroe may be able to cause Golovkin problems would be similar areas to what I'd be looking for Lara and Jickham to do, and I didn't see enough from Monroe Jr. I didn't see the skills he brought to the table causing Golovkin enough problems. I mean, put simply, what I saw was Monroe looking quite pretty, throwing beautiful combinations, moving well, angling well, jabbing nicely, but I saw Golovkin timing him excellently. There was this one moment where Golovkin kind of cuts down the ring. This is for the first knockdown, and he kind of keeps Monroe in the corner. He lets Monroe jab him 5 or 6 times, and he kind of just waits and waits and waits, and seriously, probably 5 or 6 seconds happens, and he throws this huge power punch and drops Monroe Jr. So it was a really good performance from Golovkin. I felt in rounds 3 and 4, maybe he got tired from the beatdown he gave out in round 2, but rounds 3 or 4 he let Monroe back into the fight. A lot of Golovkin fanboys will say, oh, he was trying to make it entertaining, or, oh, he didn't want the fight to finish early again, he wanted to give the fans value. But the truth is, either for me, he was taking a step back after, a big round 2, which maybe left him tired, or potentially that Monroe's skill set did cause him a few problems. But we saw Monroe Jr. landing a lot of shots from Golovkin, you know, combination punching. And we saw Martin Murray do this as well at times. And it does make me think, how would he fare against a genuine power puncher? Because the guys he's been fighting, you know, Curtis Stevens, Curtis Stevens is known as a little bit of a puncher. Marco Antonio Rubio and Daniel Gill can both punch a little bit. You know, these aren't feather-fisted guys, but guys like, Matthew Macklin, Martin Murray, Willie Monroe Jr., they're not the biggest punchers in the division. And the way Golovkin eats shots, it does make me think, could a Peter Quillen and Andy Lee, could a David Lemieux hurt him? But I guess the difficulty is it's not just about hurting Gennady Golovkin, it's also about not getting knocked out when he hurts you. And the difficulty in what I'm seeing is David Lemieux, you know, he's been stopped. Andy Lee, he's been stopped. He was also dropped several times by Peter Quillen. Yeah, Peter Quillen, he's undefeated, but he was dropped heavily by Andy Lee. My point is that whilst all of these guys, you know, the Lemieux, Lees, Quillens, so forth, can punch and could hypothetically hurt Triple G with perhaps defensive frailties that exist in Triple G's game. Is David Lemieux going to survive for long enough? Is he going to be able to take anything from Triple G to even mean he's in a position to land that offensive output? And I think the answer to that may well be in the negative. I mean, my point is, at present, Golovkin is just running through people, and he's beating now people with different styles. I don't buy into this Golovkin being an offensive wizard. I think his CompuBox stats are so good because he's so dominant and so aggressive that he knocks people out before they have a chance to really hit him, or he puts them in a shell straight away with their output drops. And I think against different fighters, specifically if he moves up in weight, he will be found out as defensively average. But I think at the minute he's so dominant that's not necessarily coming to the fore. So for me the question is, what tests are out there for him? Now I strongly would suggest if I was managing Golovkin he stays away from 168 pounds. Because for me he is a fighter who, as I say, takes hits. He is someone who you can land on. And I think if the punches that Willie Monroe Jr. was landing was coming from a big puncher at 168, there may be a different dynamic to the fight. Guys like Carl Frost, James DeGale, Andre Ward, they're so much bigger, stronger, more durable than the likes of Matthew Macklin and Martin Murray and Willie Monroe Jr. But I don't think it plays to Golovkin's strengths to go up there. For me, almost the more intriguing options are down in weight. You know, Golovkin isn't massive for middleweight. And I think at 154 pounds, or a catchweight, say 157, 158, you've got guys like Canelo and Demetrius Andrade who are big for the weight, who are big for light middleweight, who could potentially meet him in the middle. And I think both of those guys, I mean, let's look at Canelo, for example, all-action fighter, hand speed, combinations, power punches, shown an excellent chin so far. For me, that's a more even fight. You know, Frotz versus Golovkin, for me, Frotz is just too big, too strong, too durable. Whereas Canelo Golovkin is one that I see as a more even matchup. You know, at this stage, Golovkin would have to be the favourite, given the fact that Canelo would be moving up in weight, and you know, Golovkin is running through opposition like he is. But for me, that's an interesting fight. In terms of the names I'd like to see him fight at 160, we're running out now. 160 isn't the strongest division. I'm not one of these people who's gagging for Cotto Golovkin, because I'm not totally sold on Cotto at 160. I think for me, the best operator at 160 outside of Golovkin is still Peter Quillen. You know, I was very disappointed by his performance last time out, but he's got skills, and if he turns up in shape, he's potentially someone who could create an interesting fight. He also carries a lot of power and is big at the weight. So Peter Quillen's someone I'd like to see, although again, you'd favour Golovkin in that fight. Maybe the other one, and I know this sounds bizarre because this is a guy I've constantly berated on my channel, but it could actually be Chris Eubank Jr. Yeah, Eubank Jr. is another guy very big at the weight, I don't see him as a massive power puncher, but carries more power than a Willie Monroe Jr. or a Matthew Macklin or a Martin Murray, but also has shown excellent durability. Now, obviously that's durability at a much lower level, but he's given us no concerns about his chin, you know, and Gennady Golovkin hasn't really shown us much of a back foot game, so if Chris Eubank Jr. could come forward and use his strength and push Golovkin back and be the bigger man at the weight, yeah, potentially that's an interesting dynamic. Yeah, I used to think that someone could step on the back foot and outbox him using jab and movement, but after the performance against Willie Monroe Jr., you know, slick moving southpaw, I've kind of lost that belief. So now I'm almost inclined to want to see him go up against a mauler, you know, someone with a chin, someone with strength, someone who's going to push him back, someone who's going to test him out on the back foot, and someone who's maybe going to trade with him. And, you know, perhaps a Chris Eubank Jr. or a Canelo. Yeah, these are all fights you'd favour Golovkin in. I'm not saying I'm picking these guys to beat Golovkin, but in terms of testing Golovkin against all of the different styles and all the different ways to beat him, that's maybe the area that I myself would be keen to see now, is see someone who's going to, you know, really try and push him back and have a go at hurting him. That's just my thoughts anyway. Willie Monroe Jr. performed with credit. He can be a real force in the division, I believe. He can easily go down as a top 5, top 10 fighter. Fundamentally, his downfall in the future could certainly be a lack of power. But I think Willie Monroe Jr. could be a world champion. You know, he's got a lot to like of him, a lot of attributes. And I could see him beating a Miguel Cotto or an Andy Lee. You know, let's not forget Miguel Cotto was soundly outboxed by Austin Trout relatively recently. Let's not forget that Andy Lee was getting schooled by Corrigan until the KO. You know, Willie Monroe Jr., he's got a chance against those sort of guys because he's got a lot of skills. As for Triple G, you know, I'm becoming more and more converted in him. He still hasn't beaten a top 5 middleweight in my estimations, and the middleweight division is looking quite light at present. And he definitely deserves to be number 1. But in terms of interesting fights left for him, because I don't think he's a step up, I think he'll get beat if he steps up. So in terms of where I'd like to see him go next, Quillen, Alvarez, you know, I mentioned Eubank, obviously that's not a fight that's likely to happen, but there are still a few names left out there for him. Let me know your thoughts. Keen to discuss. Thanks very much for watching.